It was Halloween night, the one night of the year when everything in my small town seemed to change. The streets, usually quiet and empty, were alive with flickering jack-o'-lanterns and kids in costumes running up and down the sidewalks with bags full of candy. The air was crisp, the kind that bites at your skin just enough to remind you winter is close. But this year felt different. Not just because I was too old for trick-or-treating or because I'd been left in charge of watching my little brother, Ethan. It was something else. A tension in the air, a heaviness that sat in the back of my mind, whispering that tonight wasn't going to be like any other Halloween. I stood by the window, watching Ethan run from house to house with his friends. The dim streetlights cast long shadows across the road, and the orange glow from the jack-o'-lanterns flickered as the wind picked up. The more I stared at the dark spaces between the lights, the more I felt something was off. I tried to shake it, but the feeling clung to me, crawling under my skin like a persistent itch. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Mom, home by 10. Don't let Ethan out of your sight, It was already close to 9, and I knew Ethan wasn't going to be ready to call it a night anytime soon. He was full of sugar, wearing his superhero cape like he actually thought it gave him powers. I had a sinking feeling I wasn't going to be able to get him back home on time without a fight. I grabbed my jacket and headed outside. The streets seemed quieter now, fewer kids running around, fewer porch lights on. I caught up with Ethan just as he was leaving a house with a handful of candy, laughing with his friends. His eyes met mine, and he groaned. "Come on, we still have time for a few more houses," he whined. "We gotta head back soon," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't want him to know I felt uneasy. "Mom's expecting us." Ethan rolled his eyes but didn't argue. His friends, on the other hand, weren't as cooperative. "Just one more street," one of them said. "There's that big old house at the end of Oak Lane. I heard no one's lived there for years, but the porch lights on this year. Maybe someone moved in." The house on Oak Lane. I knew exactly which one they were talking about. It had been abandoned for as long as I could remember, boarded up windows, a crumbling roof, the kind of place everyone in town had stories about. Some said it was haunted. Others claimed something worse. "Seriously, guys? That place?" I said, crossing my arms. "We're not going there." But of course, my words didn't matter. They were already heading down the road, Ethan following close behind, too excited to care about what I said. I hesitated, glancing up and down the street. The wind had picked up again, and the air had a sharp, bitter edge to it. It felt colder than it should have been for October, but maybe I was just being paranoid. With a sigh, I followed them, my stomach knotting tighter with every step. The house loomed at the end of the street, towering above the other homes like a dark, forgotten giant. It was as creepy as I remembered, with its peeling paint and broken shutters. But what caught my eye was the porch light. It was on, a soft yellow glow spilling across the cracked front steps. "See? I told you," one of the kids said. "Someone's living here now." But something about that light didn't feel right. It wasn't warm or inviting. It was sickly, almost like it was flickering, just waiting to go out. The longer I stared at it, the more the knot in my stomach twisted. "We shouldn't be here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let's just go home." But Ethan, fearless as always, had already made it halfway up the front yard. I hurried after him, grabbing his arm before he could get any closer to the porch. "Ethan, stop," I said, pulling him back. "I mean it. We need to go." For a moment, he looked like he might argue, but then something strange happened. The front door creaked open. Slowly. No one stepped out, and there was no sound from inside. Just the door, swinging open, revealing nothing but darkness beyond it. The kids around us stopped laughing. No one said a word. We all just stood there, staring at the open door. My skin prickled, and every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around and run. But my legs wouldn't move. Ethan, of course, was the first to break the silence. "Maybe they're giving out full-sized candy bars," he joked, trying to break the tension. But no one laughed. And then, as if in answer to his joke, a voice came from inside the house. Low, raspy, almost like it had to drag itself through the air to reach us. "Come in." Ethan froze. We all did. There was something about that voice, something wrong. It wasn't the kind of voice you'd expect to hear on a fun Halloween night. It was cold, empty, like it didn't belong to anyone at all. It echoed in my head, and the knot in my stomach tightened until I thought I might be sick. "We're leaving," I said firmly, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him away from the house. He didn't resist this time. His bravado had melted away, replaced by the same unease I was feeling. But before we could make it far, the door creaked again. I turned just in time to see it slowly swinging shut. But not completely. It stopped just before closing, leaving a thin sliver of darkness visible between the door and the frame. "Come in," the voice repeated, softer this time, like it was further away, deeper in the house. And then the door closed with a quiet click. For a long moment, no one said anything. The street was empty now. The lights in the other houses seemed dimmer, the wind colder. We stood there in the middle of the street, staring at the house, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. Finally, one of Ethan's friends broke the silence. Maybe it was just a prank. Someone messing with us. But I wasn't convinced. I knew what I heard. And I knew that whatever was in that house wasn't human. "We're going home," I said again, this time more forcefully. "Now." Ethan didn't argue. Neither did his friends. We walked back down the street, our footsteps louder than they should have been in the quiet night. I kept glancing back at the house, expecting to see someone or something standing on the porch, watching us. But it remained as empty as ever, the sickly yellow light flickering in the distance. When we got back home, the house felt safe, warm, like a sanctuary from the cold, eerie world outside. I locked the doors, double-checking the windows. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us home. Ethan went to bed, his earlier excitement gone, replaced by a quiet unease. I sat by the window again, staring out at the dark street, half expecting to see the house on Oak Lane staring back at me. The hours ticked by, and the town outside grew even quieter. The wind had died down, and the jack-o'-lanterns on the porches had all gone out, leaving the streets in total darkness. But even as the clock neared midnight, I couldn't relax. Something was wrong. I could feel it. And then, just as I was about to turn away from the window, I saw it. A figure, standing in the middle of the street, staring up at my house. It wasn't close enough for me to make out any details, but I knew it was watching. Just standing there. Unmoving. My breath caught in my throat, and I stepped back from the window, my pulse quickening. I blinked, hoping it was just a trick of the light. But when I looked again, the figure was still there. Closer now. It had moved, silently, almost like it had floated through the air. And it was staring right at me. My mouth went dry, and I stumbled away from the window, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing for sure, whatever was outside wasn't human. And it had followed us from the house on Oak Lane. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I backed away from the window. The house was too quiet. The air too still. I could hear my own breathing, too loud in the silence. And then there was a knock at the door. Soft, almost polite, but insistent. Like whoever or whatever was outside didn't mind waiting.